That did not come off. I wonder why that did not come off. I mean, it's not terrible. It's pretty cool looking for what it is,
Yeah,
but
I guess it fits.
but
It does fit.
So there's that. Sorry, y'all.
Oh, you're
I'm
messing with the
still,
one. There you go. You had
I know.
one in the corner. And
There it
you had
I'm
one.
still trying to learn the fact that we're on mobile too, and that's kind of goofy. I don't know how I feel about that yet, so I don't know if I like it or if I don't like it. So, anyways, welcome to episode 9,000,007. No, I'm kidding. That's what it feels like sometimes. Welcome to episode 347. Today we're going to be talking about Phrygia. I don't even know if I said that right. I probably didn't. I have not had time to prepare. Phrygia.
Phrygia.
I hope your Phrygia is not running.
You better catch it.
I hope it is running.
Yeah, because if not, your food's going to spoil. You don't want your food
No,
to
just
spoil.
stick it outside. It's cold enough right now in Ohio.
Exactly.
Ew. Ew. And then we had all that snow recently too.
That it worked.
I've been shoveling for like days. The shoveling doesn't stop here. So can't stop, won't stop shoveling. Every day I'm shoveling. I mean, I don't know. Anyways, before we get started, we'll let our dear friend Spider say a couple things.
Just a couple things. I have something that's important to me, and then I have just some other things just to address real quick. We're still working on kind of some of the technical stuff on the show, as you folks noticed. So kind of bear with us over the next few episodes while we play with some of that kind of stuff. We're changing things around the various Uncanny Empire, trying to improve quality of everything that we've got for all you fine people. So I want to make sure that if you notice some hiccups, we're smoothing them out. We're getting it going. But the other thing I want to say is I do want to make a little bit of a dedication. I am going to dedicate this episode to a dear friend of mine who passed away a couple days ago. I had just heard about it today. I knew her since high school, and while we didn't talk very much, we were still really good friends. And so I want to just raise a quick glass here to my friend Kara Sorovic and her family. And I know it's a tough time for them, and I'm going to see what I can do to head out that ways for services. But it is in Pennsylvania, and the weather being what it is, I don't know if that's going to happen. But here's a glass for you. Does anyone else have anything they need to bring up they want to talk about before we get into the topic?
Not here.
All right, so then just clear out all my feelings here. We are going to be talking about Phrygia as part of our Lost Civilizations triptych. As you notice, we're still doing our episodes in triplicate, so 3 different episodes about a similar topic. And Phrygia was in, let me make sure I got my notes here. I did get notes, which I did not provide to the co-hosts tonight, so they have no idea where any of this is going. But I know where we're going.
Idea.
So just
I have an idea.
along.
He's winging it. He's winging it is what he's doing. He's going to make us. But I mean, listen, I'll be fair. I don't really follow along with the notes that they send because I don't send them myself personally. I'm just like, hey, look up the topic and then do that. It just makes it easier for me. That's how my brain operates. Some people need notes. I just need to read like a little synopsis and then interject a couple things. So we all have different learning styles. And my learning style is more like, okay, let me read this. Let me read a couple articles about it. And then bada boom, bada bing, real sky in the room. How you doing?
Well, Phrygia is interesting. It was a relatively minor kingdom as far as history goes, but it had a profound effect on a lot of things that came after. Phrygia was a part of, it was in classical antiquity, and that is an area between the 8th century BC and the 5th century AD. It's when Greece and Rome were at the height of their respective powers and had the most influence on the culture of the Mediterranean and into Europe as a whole, and that part of what was known as at the time Asia Minor, and it's now known as Anatolia. Modern day, that's the country of Turkey. which has had a lot of these little smaller civilizations that have cropped up and disappeared and kind of been moved around and then later swallowed up by the Ottoman Empire and modern civilization that came later.
I just want to make a quick statement, if I may. If you guys ever see me like changing screens, it's because I'm posting to places that don't automatically post to. Some of our Facebook stuff and things like that don't automatically post because Spreaker doesn't allow that. Like I can't post it to my personal page because Spreaker won't allow that, and I can't post it to Discord because Spreaker doesn't allow that either. So if you guys ever like, is he not just paying attention? No, I'm paying attention, but behind the scenes, I have to make sure links are put where they're supposed to, so people can hear our episode. So it's not me ignoring these two fine gentlemen. It's me making sure that other people can hear us because Spreaker doesn't post to those avenues. So my apologies. I wasn't trying to stop your thunder, but I don't want people thinking that I'm just don't care. I'm very much caring.
He's the social media guy. He's got to handle all that kind of stuff.
Facts.
Now, before I get too far into it, as we've asked in the previous 2 episodes, I do want to check in with you guys, check with your brains, and see what have you, if anything, ever heard of Phrygia before I brought up the topic for tonight? Steven.
Before you brought up the topic, nothing, but I did find out some interesting things during my research.
Mm-hmm. And we are going to talk about some of that because you brought up a good point in the chat that we had about this earlier that I had not looked into either, and it added an extra little, let's talk about that. Rob, what about you? Had you heard about any of this beforehand?
So, like, I know bits and pieces, like, I know about the Gordian knot, which I don't know if this is the same time. Obviously, I know about King Midas and the Golden Touch, and some interesting news they found recently. Archaeologists have found some information regarding King Midas and his whole ruling area. So that was cool. But in terms of like deep dives, this is one of the many civilizations that it's like, hey, I'll get to that when I get a chance. But it's at it's not it wasn't something that was on my hot list, but now it is.
Now, this is an interesting kingdom for me because this area of the world has, in some history nerd moments, some of my favorite historical civilizations. One of my absolute favorites was Cappadocia, which was just on the southeast end of the Phrygian Empire, or the Phrygian Kingdom. And Cappadocia, as some people might know, built vast tunnel cities underground in Turkey, with living quarters, with kitchens, with just all kinds of ins and outs. And there's still, in parts of that area of Turkey, there's cities built on top of the tunnels, and there's tunnels underneath people's homes. They can move a rug, and yeah, we've got a tunnel leading out of our cellar, and it connects to all these other places. Some of them have collapsed over time, of course, but they're pretty famous. It's one of the modern wonders of the world, and it's one of my favorite places. But Phrygia encompassed a pretty wide area of Asia Minor at the time, which is pretty impressive considering there's not a whole lot of information on where exactly the Phrygians came from and what kind of peoples they were related to. There's bits and pieces that have come out. According to ancient tradition among Greek historians, the Phrygians migrated to Anatolia from the Balkans, and that's been attributed to famous ancient historians like Herodotus. He was the guy who said, "Let no man be happy until he is dead." That's not the exact phrase. I paraphrased it a little bit, but it's still one of my favorites.
Makes sense for you. Like that I feel like that's your
that's just one of those things. It's kind of like, yeah.
I feel like once it's your time to go, I'm 100% putting that on your head. So I'd be like, he wasn't happy until he was dead.
Yeah, that'd be it. Other historians that wrote about him were the classical historian Strabo. I don't remember exactly what the pronunciation is. And he also said that they migrated to Anatolia from the Balkans. But there were rumors, according to Herodotus, that Midas came from Macedonia. And we're going to talk about Midas in just a minute, too, because the biggest thing, there's 2 areas that Phrygia is really fascinating to me for. And one is the mythology, because there's some pretty good, like, a lot of people have heard about these legends. These are stories that everybody knows, like, oh yeah, I've heard about that, but you have no idea it came from Phrygia because you've never heard that name before. And the other thing is the impact on Greek society and later culture, which is also very interesting.
I think a lot of times it gets. I think the myths a lot of times with that get overshadowed, or not the myths. I'm sorry, but like the contributions to Greek society get overshadowed by the myths that people believe in, and they're like, "Oh man, he touched and turned to gold," but you don't really understand that like the governmental structure has serious roots based in that aspect.
Just a little bit more history on where the kingdom went. It was at its peak in the late 8th century BC under King Midas. And that he was the last independent king of Phrygia before first the Cimmerians sacked the Phrygian capital. Now, here's an interesting little tie-in, because the Cimmerians, while they were a real people from a real nation, they were co-opted in the writings of the individual who wrote Conan the Barbarian. He was a Cimmerian. So there was a little bit of historical fact within the fantasy of Conan that bridged on this. So that's even more impact from this area of the world, which is, again, fascinating. It later became subject to the kingdom of Lydia, then Persia, then Alexander the Great steamed through because he steamrolled everybody in that area. The Seleucid Empire, Pergamon, the Roman Empire, and the Byzantine Empire. And over time, the Phrygian people became Christian because, of course, Rome and everybody else that they came after were like, "Yep, you're going to convert or we're going to murder you." And so, of course, they did. And they became Greek-speaking, and they assimilated into the Byzantine state. And after the Turkish conquest of Anatolia in the late Middle Ages, the actual name Phrygia as a region, it passed out of usage. People stopped using it as a reference for things. They didn't consider it that kind of a country anymore. And that's when it was kind of lost to history. But it's a long list of people that they kind of were vassal states to. And these are the power players of that time in history. You had the Persians, you had Alexander the Great, you had Pergamon. If you haven't heard about Pergamon, big deal. It's a big deal in classical antiquity.
Yeah.
Plus the Romans and the Byzantines.
I really don't think you can leave out. You can't leave out King Porus either. Raj Porus. Raj Porus isn't talked about as much, and I think on one of our future episodes I'll do more of a delve, because we haven't really touched on India much. So I think I'll do a delve into Raj Porus, because that was the only place that Alexander the Great, my favorite tactician, couldn't steamroll because the temperatures and everything else,
jungles,
elephants, and he couldn't steamroll it. But Raj Porus was so impressed with Alexander that he gave him a piece of his own land in India. So sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
It's good points.
Raj Porus is like Zoroastrianism. I like to bring it up in conversations like CrossFit or
lactose intolerance.
Yes, one of those. Exactly.
Simulation theory.
Yeah, all that jazz.
Now there's three legendary kings I'm going to get into before I get into the contributions of Phrygia into modern society afterwards. There are three legendary kings that Phrygia is known for. And again, that people might not know that they were from Phrygia. The first and most obvious, which was not the first king, but he was the last great king before they were, nope, you belong to us now. All your kings are our people, so we're not going to mention their names because they're just suckers. We don't care. King Midas. King Midas. We know King Midas from the story of the Midas touch. Midas, of course, and it's been so long since I looked into the actual story. I don't remember where he got the touch from. I believe he got it from, he made a deal with the gods or something, didn't he?
It's like a curse. I think it was like a curse.
He was a greedy king. He wanted as much gold as he could get. He loved riches, and he wanted as much as he could get. And I know Steven's over there furiously looking it up for me. which I appreciate. I'm not yelling at you for it. But he wanted to be able to turn things into gold just by touching them. And the legend goes, of course, that he was granted this ability. But not only did he touch things that he wanted to be gold, to be rich, but he also didn't pay attention to what he was touching. He touched his food. His food turned into gold. He couldn't eat it. He touched, and there in the chat also, if you don't know, Stephen looked it up for us. So there is where he got the touch from, which is fascinating again, because Dionysus, he's a trickster. He's one of those trickster gods. And you always got to watch out for them. It's a double-edged sword.
Isn't that Pan? Isn't Pan and Dionysus the same?
I think so.
And Bacchus.
Pan is very central to Phrygian lore.
Yep. And so he would touch his food. He wouldn't be able to eat because his food would be gold. He eventually touched his wife. She turned into gold. And according to some versions of the story, he flipped out and was like, oh no, and he touched himself and turned himself into gold. And so ended the reign of King Midas. But who knows? That's all, from a scientific perspective, we know that's not usually a thing that's possible. But you never know. We like to delve into what ifs on this show. And so I'm going to ask you two each first before I get into my possible theories on a realistic touching things and they becoming a different substance. What do you think the Midas touch actually was? Was it real gold, or was it a condition? Was it a disease? What do you think it was, if it existed at all? Rob, what's on your mind?
So if we look at what gold represents, what does gold represent, right? Gold represents power. Gold represents wealth. Gold represents technology. Gold represents a lot of things, right? To a lot of people, it's one of the most valuable resources on the planet. People don't say that now because they move people away from the gold standard so they could steal all the gold, but that's a whole different story for another time.
It represents desire, I believe.
So for me, I think he had the touch to make things powerful. He was able to touch things and make them powerful. They said his food, he turned to gold, power. I think he was at a point where he was so greedy, being able to do that he was able to turn things into power and give power and have that touch. I don't think what he touched turned to gold because, for lack of better terminology, if he touched his dingle dangle parts, he'd use the facilities, as I will say. He wouldn't have been able to use the facilities. And let's be honest, the human physiology, if you do not evacuate your poisons will back up into your system and it will kill you. So I don't think it was anything to do with actual gold, but rather maybe a metaphor for everything he touched turned to something valuable. Whether that value was positive or negative is up to the person discerning it, but I feel like he was able to have sort of that touch. I don't know. I'm done.
It's an interesting theory. It is an interesting theory. Stephen, what do you think? How do you interpret it? How do you interpret that?
So, before I go any further, I thought you were going to mention this, but you didn't. So I would like to mention it now. And my research actually told me that Midas was not necessarily the king's name, but more of a title. And multiple kings were named King Midas as the title.
It could have been a common thing in that time period among that part of the world.
As far as, the story of the king that touched things and they turned to gold, I kind of agree with Rob. I think it was more of a metaphor, and I think what it was is he would touch things, and rather than turning to gold necessarily, he just got to a level where he had so much power and so much greed that he could literally just be like, bring me that woman. And people would bring him that woman, or, whatever he wanted. He could just touch anything and it would instantly want him. I think the gold was more about desire than anything else.
That's
I don't
really
think
good.
Like power and desire, like Rob said with power, my personal interpretation, I think it was about desire, and gold was representative of things that we all desire, and King Midas was representative of how far people are willing to go to get the ultimate power, to get everything that they desire.
I think that's a good analogy. I think that's a fantastic analogy given the circumstances of what everything happened, and it was a curse. I think,
and how
you get that power and you get that want, it becomes a curse after a while. It's not something that, and you can't control it. Once you have so much power, it's so easy to overstep or, become consumed by it. The old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
It happens to many villains in our stories.
I think that, he's like, I can do anything I want. I can touch anything I want and it turns to gold. There's a saying that everything you touch turns to gold, and that's representative of like talent. So maybe that's another avenue, is that he had that kind of talent. He had that kind of ability where if he wanted to play the saxophone, obviously the saxophone didn't exist back then, but he had the ability to do so. So maybe the Midas touch is more of a talent, like anything he set his mind to, it would become that. And, you could say, well, what about his food? He couldn't eat his food, touch the gold. But maybe at that point he could cook. I don't know. This one,
he had no interest in
interpretation.
Maybe he had no interest.
Maybe the power the power he wielded was so powerful that he was like, you know what? I don't want to eat. I don't want to sleep. I just want to consume more power. And that's another good point.
And both of those are good theories too. And I'm not going to disagree with them with what I'm going to propose. I'm just going to propose another alternative that could be a thing, because again, I like to inject a little bit of potential science into old stories. And we like to talk about alchemy on the show here. We mentioned that a lot. So I propose
100%.
What if being granted the golden touch actually granted him a substance, perhaps like a powder or something of that kind, that he could spread on things to make them look like gold?
The Philosopher's Stone.
Not necessarily quite that deep, but it could even be connected. It's a possibility. But the problem there was bacteria in the powder. It was like ancient anthrax, kind of. It was one of those things where you can put it on things and it would look nice, but you can't eat it. It'll get into your skin and it'll seep in and it'll poison people.
Sorry.
That's why if he touched his wife, she turned to gold. It seeped into her skin. It poisoned her. It gave her blood poisoning.
So you're almost doing this in a mercury sense.
Kind of. Very similar. Very similar kind of thing.
It could be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be a different name for mercury
that's equated to
that's
gold.
A good one too.
Now you got me thinking of the radium girls.
Yeah, it could be any number of things, because we know all of these things were around at the time. They didn't necessarily know what all of them were, to our knowledge anyway. Mm-hmm. But we know that there was radioactivity in different places. We know that there was, all kinds of things. And we might not know the quantities. And maybe he met up with somebody who claimed to be Dionysus, who wasn't really, but who knew a good sucker when he saw one, and said, hey, I'll grant you the wish. I got all this stuff here. I got the elixir of life. I got this, I got that. And here's my powder that turns things into gold.
Oh, you know what that's very reminiscent of if we move forward into our Old West to Americana era.
That's exactly
early 1900s. We got
snake oil.
You got Dr. Spider's cure-all, and really
it's on the back of the wagon.
It's just sativa, morphine, indica, alcohol. I mean, I would love some of that for those sleepless nights. I'd be gone. But I mean, maybe same basic concept. It was a concoction of things. That person was highly intelligent in the avenue of being like, okay, I know how to mix chemicals and make things good. Look at this idiot. Hey, buddy, you want to be able to turn stuff to gold? I got this powder. It did not fall off of a wagon. I made it myself in my basement. They probably didn't have a basement, but we get the point here. I'm updating this for our current listeners. So,
and that's what I propose. I mean, all of those are valid theories, I think, because again, without knowing, and we know that a lot of the writings about these myths, there's a lot of allegory involved. The story of the Midas touch is clearly a moral lesson. It's about greed. It's about letting your desires overtake you. So just how literal we have to take that is really, where the story gets a little bit murky. Continuing with some of the mythology, another king of Phrygia was named Gorgias, which could be gorgeous. And if you walk around and say, "I'm King Gorgeous," it could be pretty popular. I mean,
I do that
head.
every day. I do it every single
Gorgeous.
day. I'm King Gorgeous.
Go to the gym and be like, "Yeah, I'm King Gorgeous. I'm gonna do some bench presses right now."
I do some bench presses. That's also my wrestling name, King Gorgeous.
King Gorgeous. He apparently was in a position of power enough such that he could laugh at warlords passing through his territory, and you could tell them, "Oh, you'll never rule my kingdom. You never rule this. You never rule this. And I have a puzzle for you." And he created something called the Gordian knot.
Yes.
The Gordian knot is also a metaphor. The Gordian knot, as a metaphor, as an allegory, is a problem that is so complex that the only way to get through it is to attack it directly.
Yep.
Which is my favorite approach to problems. The Gordian knot is exactly right up my alley.
That's true.
If it's complex, just smash on through and see what happens. It's not always the best way to do it, but it is a valid way to do it. And according to the legend, he had a knot tied to an ox cart that was so complex that he would challenge people. He would say whoever could untie it would be destined to rule all of Asia. And again, according to the legend, in 333 BC, Alexander the Great steamed on in because he was steamrolling people.
Steamrolling.
And he was challenged to untie the knot. But instead of untying it like bit by bit, like everybody expected, he was just like, "Okay, I'll cut through your knot," and just cut it with a sword.
Yep.
I mean, that's
easiest way to solve the problem.
He was a tactician. This is a man who I think with like 25,000 soldiers took out 250,000 Persian troops, something his own father, Philip II, could not do. I'm a big
to waste time.
I'm a big fan of Alexander the Great, and I've studied him ad nauseum. So, like, the whole concept, because for those of you who don't know, Alexander the Great was supposedly birthed by what was her name? She hated Philip II. It was Philip II's wife. But she was also part of the cult of Pythagoras. Now, we'll talk about that at another point, but the cult of Pythagoras had these crazy beliefs. And so one of these, supposedly, now I don't know how true this is, supposedly she had Alexander while she was basically in a what is that called? It's where like pregnant women lay in like warm water. It's a birthing rite, and I don't remember the name of it. Yeah. But there was snakes in it, giant like python snakes, and that when he was born, the king Philip II tried to stop that snake from happening, and he was bit by the snake, and there was blood and from the pregnancy, but also it was intertwined, and so it's a whole legend that because of that, he was destined to rule. Yeah. Let me go ahead, Spider. I'm gonna find his mother's name, and then I will bring that right back because
the Greeks were big into omens, and that was an omen situation. Like they were big into the signs. Like if you see the ravens and in this part of the sky on this day, you're gonna be winning the day, or you're gonna die, or you're gonna marry this, or you're gonna do that. There's all kinds of things. We're going to keep going with the third of the mythical kings of Phrygia, and this is Mygdon. Mygdon supposedly led a force of Phrygians against the Amazons, who we have, different evidence for whether or not they existed or not. And alongside the King Priam of Troy, one generation before the Trojan War. Now, this is where things start to merge from potential mythology into potential fact. Because the siege of Troy was assumed to be myth for the longest time. It was just a story. Until German archaeologists found the foundations of what we would eventually become known as the city of Troy. And so we got the chat is jumping. Chad, I'll try to keep my enunciation better. I'll try to enunciate a little bit better.
He's smart because he's drunk.
Well, I just started. But apparently in the Iliad, book 3 of the Iliad, Prime mentions this fact of the Trojan War to Helen of Troy. And that because of that, the Phrygians are said, a part of the Phrygians were said to have been called Mygdonians after the event against the Amazons, which is very interesting. Now, before we go too much further, other than, of course, King Midas, of the other two legends, what did you two know about this before we started to talk about it, before we really got into it? Stephen, what did you know about Gorgeous and Mygdon?
Before we started our research, absolutely nothing. Hadn't even heard of them. But I did know the existence of Alexander the Great, and I did not know how he cut the Phrygian
Gordian knot.
Gordian knot. The Gordian knot, yeah. I didn't know how he cut that, but I love how he did it because it was very liminal. It was very liminal of him because, you know, people are like, oh, I got to figure out how to do this. I got to figure out how to untie it. And he's like, there's no need to untie it if I just cut right through it. So I thought that was really cool.
The Gordian knot metaphor is very similar to Occam's razor, which is the best solution to any problem is generally the most simple solution or the most direct solution.
Yeah.
Which is another one of my favorite things because, again, I don't like puzzles. I think it's pretty obvious that I don't like them. I like to just solve a problem. And how do you best solve a problem? You attack it head on. And if that doesn't work, then you try something else. But both of these metaphors speak to me as a person. That's how I handle life, which is probably why I get into some issues and problems. But, Robert, what did you know about Gorgeous and Mygdon?
So I am very ignorant on those two kings. Once again, this area, this location on the globe was kind of yes and no for me. Like, obviously, as a big fan of Alexander the Great, I'm well versed in the Gordian knot because what we have to stand about Alexander, and this is something that I personally take into my own life. I don't stop. I have to keep going. I like, you know, when he, when he had Hephaestion and Clitus and Ptolemy and the mad horse, Bucephalus, it was all because he wanted speed. He wanted to keep going. He didn't want to stop. And I'm very much the same way. I can't stop. I have to keep going no matter what gets in my way, no matter what happens, no matter what obstacles and hurdles that I have to go through. I will never stop. It's just something that I have to do. And so when you talk about, you know, King Gorgeous George or, you know, Megalodon, the giant shark king, what we have to understand is that these kings, especially in the instance of, hey, you know what, you're not going to rule me. You're almost trying to jumpstart a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, okay, you can't get me, but then you're going to get got because you're bringing that sort of aspect in. Right. And you're asking for somebody to train hard enough because there's always somebody that will out-train you no matter what. There's always somebody who's going to out-train you. Always. And so to understand this, you can sort of understand how civilizations rise and they fall, how they come to fruition, and then how they collapse, because there's always a king or kings, multiple, that think themselves, the best way I can put it is above God. So they rule that they think they are gods, and then they find out real quick when there's a spear attached to their spleen or there's a spear attached to their throat that they're not so godlike and they can easily be toppled. That's why a lot of your rulers, you know, your good rulers err on the side of humility. They're more like, you know, I am not a god. I'm here to rule, but I do so fairly. And so from our conversation just now talking about these two kings, it's apparent that obviously, you know, King Gorgeous. I mean, come on. I mean, the name speaks for itself. And then, you know, with the other one, it just feels like they got high on their own character instead of saying, okay, I got to chill because I'm a human being. But we see this. This is a common trait in a lot of rulers all
A lot
throughout
of
history.
humans.
Yes. I mean, if you look at Japan with their, you know, Emperor Hirohito was thought to be descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu. So it's very interesting, and I think you see a lot of mirrors between that and between other historical figures. So to get back to your term, because I went way out of bounds with this one.
You made a good point though, which I'm going to address in a minute.
I wasn't really aware of them, but now when I do read more about them, I will have a better background to sort of get into that area of the world.
It's the kings of this time had come a long way from ancient Sumer, where when you became king of a city-state, you walked up the ziggurat, you sat at the top, the priesthood came up because they were the in communication with the gods, and they slapped your face as hard as they freaking could.
And you had to take it.
You had to take it. And you had to show that you were humble enough not to get angry, not to be upset by it, not to be like, you know what, you shouldn't have done that because I'm the king. You had to show that, okay, the gods are better than me. I'm a person of the people. I'm no better than the people. I have to show that I'm just like them. You have to slap me, and I have to sit here, and I have to be like, okay.
And you couldn't flinch.
Yeah,
you had to take it because they also didn't want you to show weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a double-sided coin. On one end,
very interesting.
You couldn't lash out because that showed you were hothead. You couldn't be trusted to be able to handle things diplomatically.
And it was
on the other side of that, if you were like, "Oh, my face," then they're like, "Yeah, this dude's he's going to be weak. There's no way he can rule us." And then you got people that are watching this, right? It's not the priest that you have to
in front of the people. They would watch the ceremony.
People, yes. And if they see, oh man, this dude's weak, we got him. Let's get him. We'll wait till it dies down. Then we're just gonna kill him. We'll put somebody else there. Or on the flip side of that, oh, okay, now we'll just make him mad. We'll just start making him mad so that he goes crazy. Everybody will hate him. Then we'll overthrow him. So when you got one of those great kings, one of those great kings of Sumeria up there that were like taking face slaps all day and just staring back at the void like it wasn't nothing, that was the king. They're like, okay, this one's not playing around. Good point.
Yeah, it is a long way from there to where you got with Greece and Rome. Especially with Rome. Once Rome came along, the Caesars, they're like, hey, you know, we do what we want. Nobody can stop us. Oh yeah, we'll say this to the Christian gods, whatever. We'll convert. Of course we will. Right. But we're going to go out and try to bulldoze everybody because we can do whatever we want. And that's why the barbarians came through and assaulted Rome multiple times because they're like, no, you won't. You think you're better than our gods? No, you won't.
But that's why they also interjected pagan ideologies into parts of Christianity to appease those barbaric tribes so they could be like, well, okay, we can't beat you with force because you will get absolutely destroyed because we were spread too thin. We're down in Africa. We're up here. We already killed some dude in Carthage. We got Hannibal, but now we're up here. We're fighting Vandals. We're fighting Visigoths. We're fighting all of these different people. We're stretched too thin. What do you want to do? I got it. Incorporate some of their beliefs into our beliefs, and we're set.
Mm-hmm.
I get excited.
Beat them, absorb them. I'm going to move on to a couple of things before I get into where Steven really wants us to go, which is the Phrygian religion. I know he's really excited about this part. But there's a couple of contributions that Phrygia made to modern society that are, one of them is still actually called by a Phrygian name, which is interesting. In the first area, it's music. The earliest traditions of Greek music derived from Phrygia, and they passed those along to the Greek colonies in Anatolia, and they included a certain kind of musical scale called the Phrygian mode. I'm going to see if this will let me play this from my phone.
He's about to explain that.
It has it's got a music sample on Wikipedia about it. And I'm going to see if you guys can hear it. So I hope it's not too loud. Let me see if I can play it.
Do, re, mi.
And that's a very specific kind of tone. When you talk about musical scales, there's different. If you're talking about classical music, if you're talking about metal music, if you're talking about different things, kids' music, it has to be in a certain kind of sound. Kids' music has to be a certain kind of tone where it sounds happy, and it just depends on the notes you play. Metal music and classical music, a lot of times, is dissonant. It can be tones that don't exactly mesh up with each other. And the Phrygian mode is one of the most basic forms that we have. It doesn't mean that they invented music or that they invented musical scales, but they created a certain organization of the notes that we still call it that today. We still call it the Phrygian mode, which is really super fascinating for a musical person like myself. Because I didn't know that. I didn't know that before. I know scales, I know A, B, C, D, all that kind of stuff. I can read sheet music, but you don't always know where some of these things come from. And the Phrygians were one of the innovators of our modern basic scaling of tones. The other thing, which was really kind of funny to me, because once I looked up what it looked like, I was kind of like, for people who've played the Elder Scrolls, and you get the people who got those fur-lined hats that look kind of like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Phrygian cap.
Yeah.
The Phrygian cap, apparently, the Trojan Paris was a member of the Trojan army, but he wasn't from Troy. He was recruited, but he was Phrygian. And the reason that you could tell him apart was because he had a Phrygian cap. It's interestingly the same cap worn by the god Mithras, which is the red cap, which looks like a Santa hat.
Yes.
It's basically a Santa hat.
Yep. Sure
okay.
is.
And it later survived in usage to be worn by the Americans and French members of the American Revolution.
Yep.
Which is super interesting. It's from this part of the world. It's from ancient Phrygia. It's the Phrygian cap, and it's the Santa hat. It is essentially a Santa hat without some of the extra frill on it.
No pom-pom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in some of the pictures had a bit of it. It had a little bit of a thing, but it wasn't as pronounced. It was just more like the end of the cap. So regardless of whether we remember where Phrygia came from or whether it even existed at all, a lot of its various contributions have cropped up in unusual places.
And it's interesting because Mithras is also in Zoroastrianism.
Mm-hmm.
So as he's flying around, because in Zoroastrianism, Mithras judges people as he's flying around the earth and just straight will just murk you. That's it. Bye-bye. You're done. So imagine this dude wearing this cap, just looking at people like dead, dead, dead.
Someone
dead.
stole my sweet roll.
Yeah, you getting hit with that lightning. You getting hit with that that Mithras lightning.
Now, the last area I'm going to focus on, and I know Steven's been super excited about this once he found this out, because he pointed it out in the chat. Phrygian religion was, of course, like many other religions, until the Romans converted to Christianity, was polytheistic. And it was distinct from earlier religions of the Anatolian peoples. Because it was kind of composed of a mix of different gods from the Aegeans and the Balkans. And one of the big ones was the Matar Kubaleia. And this one eventually became, under Greece, I have the name here. And
Cybele?
Stephen told me, yes, Cybele. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. But what's fascinating about this is because this is a preservation of one of the most ancient mother goddess archetypes that have existed throughout history.
Older than Zeus.
It's one of the oldest forms of a female deity that has existed in statuary, because it's the classic, it's a large, overweight female figure that in that time was obviously, that's a attractive, fertile woman. This is the the apex of womanhood. And I don't want anybody to get offended. I'm not trying to be like, talk about feminism or anything like that. I'm just saying that at the time, that's what they described the apex female as an overweight,
because
nude.
the more weight you had, the more stuff you had.
Right, because you could afford to eat, you could afford to have all these nice things. And obviously, if you were a larger person, you could birth more children, so you were fertile.
Well, remember the statue without the head, the arms, and the leg, or I think it's the head's missing, and it's that fertile woman that I'm trying to remember what I think it was part of a Germanic tribe or something like that, and it's just that idol, but without the head, and it's a very large woman, and same thing, very fertile. They thought they like the thick ladies,
which I cannot disagree with.
I can't disagree with that either. What is this, prison camp?
Side note. But they used, that was the only female deity that they had. They had other male deities, like multiples of different, different situations. And one was a storm god and one was a moon god. But the only female they had was the one that was based off of the most ancient archetype, which is pretty interesting because it means they were connected to an older religious stream than what came after, because the Greeks and the Romans had discarded all of that. The Egyptians even had kind of discarded some of that. They had Maat, which was the woman who was overarching over the world, who was the sky, but she wasn't corpulent or anything. They had Hathor, which was the cow goddess, but she wasn't even necessarily like, she just, because they had the different heads, they had Anubis, they had Hathor, of course, had a bovine head, but the body wasn't anything like that. It wasn't like, oh, she's big because she's based off of a cow. That they didn't do that in Egypt.
No, it's because the internet. It's the internet. It's the internet.
So this tapped into an older religion, an older spirituality that had slowly begun to fade by this time period. And these people, the Phrygians, were still tied into that.
They had
resonance. I'm really interested in that because one of the things that I look for the most is I look at the oldest religions possible to see where all of our modern religious thought comes from, because it's all connected in some way. And the farthest back that you can go, you can see how things developed. And we're still kind of digging out where those early origins are. Right. But this is a part of that. This is a part of what ancient people believed, that there was a mother goddess, and this was how they pictured her. Rob, what do you think about all this? What do you think the connection is? Do you think they were perhaps tied into something older than what came after that's maybe been forgotten? Or do you think maybe it was just something that was best left alone?
So first off, they appreciated, much like we appreciate the thick ladies. I cannot hate that because I appreciate the thick ladies myself. But I think what they tie into, and once again, I've thought this before because I know I'm well versed on many religions. It's just something that I love to read about and love to learn about. And I think that once again, we go back to a time that exists pre-flood. Everything has stages, right? And I've always marked it down to be pre-flood, post-flood, pre-industrialization, post-industrialization. And these are very important pivotal points in the world, right? And, like you would the Younger Dryas period, things like that, right? I just measured a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of these beliefs come pre-flood. Maybe at a time when the Anunnaki or the Watchers or whatever you want to call them at that juncture were inundating mankind with different knowledge, concepts, things, weapons of war, weapons of mass destruction, however you want to put this, however you want to throw this down, right? And I think that time period, that a lot of these old world religions, and I call a lot of things old world, and when I refer to the old world, I refer to the pre-industrialization period, not the pre-flood, but you could still refer to pre-flood as old world. I just do it a little bit different personally. But I think that pre-flood era had some carryovers. If we go to, I think it's third Baruch in, it's either that, yeah, I think it's third. It's either second or third, and it talks about Noah's grandson finding a tablet that was left behind by the Watchers. There's two of these. The first tablet was meant to be able to withstand destruction by water. The second was able to withstand
Tree.
destruction by fire. So there was one of the two that was still in existence. And it said when he found it, Noah was mad that he had read it and learned about it. I think a lot of the things that these people worship, or a lot of these things that people hold dear, come from that pre-flood civilization. Obviously, I don't have any proof. This is all conjecture. So before we get anybody in the chat going crazy about this, that, and the other, it's conjecture. But I think personally that it's from an unknown belief system, whether that belief system was in fact ran by Watchers. Because when we think of Watchers, a lot of times though, these are 80-foot beings or whatever, what have you. But like we talked about last week with the ant people, what if they just wore
Soul
helmets?
code.
Or they wore different pieces of armor that made them, people say that's the cow goddess because she wears a helmet that looks like a cow, or that's the dragon god because he wears a helmet that looks like a dragon. So I think that a lot of these things that we're seeing, like the and pre-flood people probably like thick ladies too. It's something that carries over in traditions.
It was a sign of health. It was a sign of
I think
you're
so
obviously
too.
eating well.
Yes. And rich. You obviously have money if you can afford to eat well. And so, and like some of those pre-flood tales go, it was the gorging, or the it's one of the 7 deadly sins. It's where you
Gluttony.
Thank you. Gluttonous. It was such a gluttonous thing, and people worshipped it. They said, "Oh, because that's what we do today. We worship things that, celebrities do, or politicians do, or people do. They worship it. They tend to gravitate towards it. Celebrities, pop stars, things like that. There's really no difference. So if they were back then doing similar things, like, okay, she's thick, as I'll say. She's eating good. She's got to be somebody important. She's got to be somebody that we should worship or follow or believe in." And then the flood happens. And so these people find these remnants of things that existed at one point in time, and they start attaching concepts and ideas to it. Because for all we know, the little doll that I discussed might have had a head, might have had hands and arms. It just, the head's gone. Something happened to it. And so they look at it like, oh man, we got to worship this thing. It has to be worshiped because it's a thing, and we've never seen it before. And you know how people are. If they can't explain it, a lot of times they will worship it. They'll be like, we can't explain this. So it's got to be something crazy. It's got to be something extra powerful. So I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in regards to that is pre-flood objects that still exist. And for all we know, it could have been a child's doll. It could have been a little child's plaything that was mimicked after something. So for me, this whole thing, I think, is pre-flood. So if I had to say, what do I think it is? I think it's a pre-flood concept. And as we understand and dig deeper into different civilizations and into their soils, unless the pole shifted, which is all part of that concept as well, we're going to find some things that we don't have answers to, much like Rajasthan in India, where they're still finding radioactivity.
Very soon.
Much like the Sahara, where they're finding sand that has been melted and turned to glass. And that can only be done under extreme heat. It can't be done anywhere else. You can't just take a lighter to a piece of sand and turn it to glass. You have to have extreme heat that basically flash burns it into glass. So there's a lot of things that people don't understand, and I think a lot of those can be attributed to pre-flood. Do I have proof of this? Not in the slightest. I have no proof of any of this, but it's conjecture to me, but it's interesting conjecture.
One quick point before I let Steven loose, because I know he's got a lot to say. I think your point about how the idol could have also been the children's toy is applicable, because modern day, our ideal woman that we sell to our kids is Barbie dolls and things of that nature, right? It's the same concept. It's a certain shape. It's a certain thing that you
Yes.
play with, you know?
Yes.
And that's what our society is right now. You've got
Yes.
all these different things to help you lose weight, to help you tone up, to help you have good teeth, to help you with a tan and all this other kind of things. Very similar ideas. So you
It's
could be right, and it could be have nothing to do with an actual religious aspect. It could simply be this is what we idolized at the time as our image of beauty.
and I think, and I'm gonna let Steven, I'm letting him off his chain here in a hot second here. Sorry, but I don't mean to take any of your thunder away. I think that nothing has changed between us. I think there's certain
Human
things,
nature.
like we talk about what we know is as primordial fears, fear of the dark, fear of spiders and snakes. We don't know why we're afraid of it. We just are, and I think it's the same concept. We have this feeling of like, well, I don't want to die, or it's about death in that regard. I don't want to die, so I need to look as young and as fit and as healthy as possible. But our standards of healthy are Barbie shaped bodies, right? Or Arnold Schwarzenegger shaped bodies, old school Arnold, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But back then it was thick women and barrel chested men. Because if you
Yeah.
ever watched the old Hercules movies, he wasn't cut, he just barrel chested and big. So, but once again, you had to survive. And so, being able to survive requires that body type. Excuse me. And with gravity, you know, purported to have been different, or pole shifts, things like that, that back then might have worked. And we don't know what the exercise regiments and the routines were. So I think what we're doing is we're just repeating the same actions that we did back then. We're just doing in a different way.
History repeats itself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Stephen, I know you've wanted to talk about Sabine because
Yep.
you sent me some information, and I was not able to follow up on this, so I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about it. So drop it on me. What do you think?
All right. First, put your Phrygian caps on. Now, there are some things that we have missed in our discussions tonight. I was trying to mouth it so I wasn't interrupting you when you were talking about it, but
The monitor's
off-
kind of far away, so I can't see that.
yeah, but first off, with Sabine, however we pronounce it, she is also known as the goddess of liminality, the in between, the spaces that aren't one or the other, neither or. And one thing, when you were talking about the music and you talked about the Phrygian mode, there was a very serious thing that you missed.
Lay it on me.
Worshippers of Sabine believe that out of the many things, yes, no, up, down, hot, cold, the liminality space, one of the key factors of the liminality space of Sabine worship was having no gender. So when they got into the Phrygian mode, they would castrate themselves.
Ah, yes. I remember that there was something mentioned, and
Yes.
I did forget to mention that there was a big thing about eunuchs,
Yes.
and that wasn't one of the details that I
Yep.
think I probably cut for time. But you are correct.
Yes.
And that's a common thing, again, among various priesthoods, especially among primordial goddesses. They generally had male attendants, similar to how Zeus had the Vestal virgins and things like that, which is kind of like, okay, we know what you're doing because it's Zeus, and that's what he was known for. But a mother goddess is going to be protective. She's not going to allow her people to be taken advantage of. So who does she want to attend to her worshipers? Eunuchs who aren't going to want to do things to her worshipers.
Yes.
And that's a common theme throughout antiquity as well. So that's an important point. And I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that.
And as you mentioned earlier, well, we both kind of mentioned, I kind of interrupted you, I admit. She is also an older goddess than Zeus even. And Zeus is, like, from my understanding, one of the original Greek gods. And so it's interesting to me that she's older than Zeus, and you were asking us what we thought about that. And my belief is, I believe that the Phrygian people are very ancient. I believe they were part of the Hittite Empire. They split off from that, and formed into all these other subcultures. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute. But I believe they were able to tap into the Akashic records. We know about that, the ancient source. And I believe that they actually discovered they did some alterations, but I believe they came very close to discovering the source God, because I think they tapped into the Akashic records. And what I call the source God in my terminology is, I believe there is an entity that existed before the universe, before the Big Bang, and it just basically created everything from there. But without getting too far into that, I want to go back over to the Troy now. You talked about Troy earlier, the city of Troy. So one thing, the Hittites and the Phrygians both had very big worship of horses within their belief system.
The Hittites were well known for being excellent horsemen.
So I actually, during my research, I came up with my own theory. I think the Phrygian people were at a point where they were in control, and then they lost control. So they hid themselves in other cultures, including the people that attacked the city of Troy. And when they attacked the city of Troy, I actually wonder if the Phrygians didn't give them the idea to use the horse, because they were trying to worship Cybele with the liminality of using the horse as a gift of peace. And then they open the horse and they all get murdered.
And the Greeks come out. Yep.
And it was very liminal.
That does make sense too, because a lot of these societies, we don't understand how interconnected that they really were.
Because and they rose up briefly after
that area of the world. You had a lot of movement, a lot of tribes, people going here, going there, starting kingdoms, closing down kingdoms. There was a lot of things going on. And we've lost more knowledge of that area than we've gained so far. We're still digging.
Yeah.
And we're still finding out new things. But it is a legitimate theory. And the Hittites were super interesting too, because while we know a lot about them, we also don't know a lot about them. They're another one of those mystery civilizations that we have all this evidence, but then we don't know all of this. It's such an interesting part of the world. And it's fascinating. It really is.
Last thing, and then I'll let you end the show. My last thing I wanted to say was, I think one of the most interesting things about the Phrygians and the goddess they worship being Cybele, and just the history and lore around them, and always finding them imparted in other cultures. I think they may have actually done that intentionally as part of their worship for Cybele, was to remain parts of other cultures, so that it was very liminal in the idea of being their own culture while still being associated in a larger culture.
And that's another also important point, because a lot of absorbed cultures that got absorbed by Greece and Rome, they brought their deities with them and worshiped them sort of in secret, but also kind of like, oh yeah, but our deity, of course, is subservient to yours, obviously, ha ha ha, even though they had their little secret schools and their secret societies and things. And a lot of these survived during that time. And that's another thing that chewed at the fabric of Rome, because it allowed the barbarians in, because they had an in already.
Go ahead, sorry.
The ancient ways couldn't be completely stepped on.
No.
And that's what chewed at the edges of the Roman Empire.
Because we have to remember that, and I was able to trace Cernunnos, which is the deer god in Celtic folklore, to the Native Americans, and to sightings of deer men here in both Ohio and Michigan.
We should do an episode on deer man.
We did, I think. You weren't around then, but we did, I think, back in the day. The one thing I think is interesting, and Cabbage brings this up perfectly. Thank you for this, Cabbage. You can't, once you do the Trojan horse once, you can't do it twice.
Yeah.
If they fall for the okie doke twice, they don't even deserve to be a civilization. If you're like, hey, I brought this horse, we're going to try to conquer you. Hey, I brought a horse again. You're not trying to conquer us again, are you? No, this is a fun horse. This is the horse we have fun with.
This is the party horse. It's got the boom booms and all of the poles. It's the party horse.
There's a hilarious meme before we cut out. There's a hilarious meme, and it says, "Imagine you're in the Trojan horse, and your buddy looks at you like this." And they had one of those stupid helmets that had like the thing, and
Yeah.
like, listen, I'm the guy that's gonna laugh in the Trojan horse. Yeah, I'm probably gonna get us killed, but I'm gonna be the guy. We're gonna be chuckling. No, I think it's interesting because there's other there's other beliefs, religious beliefs that talk about doing the same thing. Hide within that culture and subvert it within. And that's a very interesting
It's a
concept.
metaphor, just
What
like
the
anything
Illuminati
else.
does, according to those theories.
So that's something that interests me. And obviously the Troy concept wasn't even thought to be real until they found proof of it. So how many other things have they thought was real? I'm just saying. And Wisconsin's got some great places, and a big rest in peace to Linda Godfrey. She passed
Peace to Bray
away.
Road.
She passed away, 7 years ago. A beautiful, beautiful woman, lovely author. We met her. We met her. Very sweet woman. Very sweet woman. And we had her on the show. Sorry, we didn't meet her physically. We had her on the show. I actually have a couple of her books signed behind me in the bookshelf. So, rest in peace to Linda. Wisconsin's a crazy state. Wisconsin has some things that they got a lot of dogman sightings and things like that. So, anyways, I'm rambling. Let's close the show.
Yeah. I want to thank my co-hosts tonight, Stephen and Robert Solomon, for a great discussion. It went better than I hoped it was going to go because, again, I had the passing that I had to commemorate at the beginning of the show, and I've been in a mood all day long. And so I appreciate the effort that the two of you have done to help make this a great show. Thanks to everybody in the chat room. It's too many to mention, but I'd Cabbage, Riley McGill, Sound Zeus, everybody, all you folks, thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week. We have another cycle of episodes coming up. Let me take a look at what we have coming up just in broad terms to make sure you guys are ready for it. Let's take a look at the schedule over here. What do we got?
I could do some music. Dooba dabba dooba dabba
Let's
dooba dabba.
see.
Jazz
Let's
music.
look at the
Jazz.
schedule.
More jazz music.
We're going to start on specific ghost cases, not necessarily just hauntings, but specific cases of potential spirit activity. We've got 3 lined up. I don't know if we even have them actually picked out just yet, but we're going to do that. We're gonna do some research.
We're highly unprofessional over here. We're highly unprofessional.
This is going to be a great season. I know it in my guts. But that's what's coming up. Once again, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. And I'm going to let Robert Solomon take us out.
You know what it is. You know what we do. Please tune in each week to catch us here live. If you missed the live stream, by all means, take your carcass, take your keister, take whatever you got, run over there to the YouTube. Check us out over there, youtube.com/@thisuncanny-earth. You're not going to want to miss an episode. Follow us on each of our respective streams. We got DMGRGN. He does his thing. Steven, I don't know if he's ever streaming again, but if he does, he's going to do his thing. Deadpool Head 888. And of course, myself, I'll be live tomorrow. We're going to get down. We're going to do what it's going to do. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. I think that's it. Next week, I'm going to be talking about some haunting things. So you're not going to want to miss that at all. And if you do miss it, you can check us out over at the YouTube. And to close us out with it, the greatest catchphrase of all time, there's none better, there never will be. As always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you beautiful folks next week. Peace.